So is my screen visible to you? Is my screen visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, we were discussing about water quality management and several things we have discussed over here. Now, just to make the connection with whatever we discussed in the previous class, surface waters are especially prone to seasonal changes in quality caused mainly by varying levels of organic contaminants. So that part we discussed, the procedure of runoff and percolation and how that changes the overall quality of the water. Now, during the if we want to give an example, so we can say that during the autumn and winter months, dead leaves and decaying plants release large quantities of organic matter into the streams, lakes, and other reservoirs. As a result, the degree of organic contamination reaches to the peak in the month of January and February, and which again drops down to the minimum during the month of July and August. So water has been called the matrix of life and the universal solvent. So in addition to providing a life support system for a broad range of living organisms, it can dissolve virtually every chemical compound, uh, though not necessarily to a detectable degree or concentration. So even if the concentration is not detectable limits, depending upon what type of chemicals are present, it can be significant as far as impact on the health is concerned. And that is why we should be now talking about the impurities. Now whatever is not good for the quality of water, and whatever chemicals uh, degrade the quality of water can be called as, or can be classified as, impurities. So with this we'll be now talking about the different type of impurities. So mostly if we see, we can see three different state of impurities. So we can see either dissolved or suspended or living matter. Like if you take a cup of water, or a bottle of water from any natural resources, you would be able to get impurities in these three form. Number one, dissolved; number two, suspended; and number three, living matter. Now within dissolved, we may have inorganic salts, and we may have organic matter. So in inorganic salts we can have calcium salts, magnesium salts, chloride, nitrate, and sulfate. So these are the possible impurities which one can encounter. As far as organic matter present in dissolved form, we have humic and fulvic acids, pesticides, detergents, all those actually will be present in the natural water in the dissolved form. Now coming to the suspended solid, so we may have in three different form. One is colloidal, next is inorganic, and then organic. So when we say colloidal, so that can be organic and inorganic, like clays, peat acids, all those things. So they can be in the form of suspension, or they can be in suspended form. As far as inorganic materials are concerned, so sand particles or smaller seal particles can be present in the natural water. And as far as organic impurities in suspended forms are concerned, we may have industries and domestic byproducts which usually get mixed up with the natural water during the process of runoff and infiltration. So these are basically dissolved and suspended. And one more we have, that is a living matter. So apart from those inert or passive material, we have some living material. So basically microorganisms and macroorganisms, these are the two different class depending upon the size, mostly the size of the organisms. So as far as microorganisms are concerned, most of you know that natural water can contain bacteria, algae, to some extent viruses, and macroorganisms like fish, shrimps, worms, larvae, some these are the actually different microorganism, and smaller plant also sometimes you can see in the natural water. So When we talk about impurities, so this is the broad classification of impurities which can be found in water, and their importance are also mentioned over here. So with this, now we'll be talking about the classification and origin of the impurities found in the water. So this is very important, and I have made them in tabular form. You can see in the left hand side we have the in which form you will see that, and then what is the nature of that, and then what kind of impurities are there, from where they are actually uh, get generated. So those things we'll be discussing over here. So the first one is, as you can see here, inorganic salts. So these basically happen because of the leaching of minerals, and pickup of atmospheric carbon dioxides leads to hardness, alkalinity, and other mineral impurities from the fertilizer. Once we add fertilizer in the agricultural field, and some part of that gets mixed up with the of the surface runoff, and then mostly phosphate, nitrate, and sulfate get mixed up, and they also can be considered as the inorganic salts impurities. Now, proportion of inorganic salts in domestic waste return to the water cycle, mostly sodium chloride and phosphates, they also can be considered. Sometimes industrial discharge of all kinds, especially from the metal finishing trade, and you can have several different industries. If you do some smaller, and if you do some research, just in the Google, and you will see that there are several industries which contributes to the creating contamination in the natural water bodies. So in many different ways, so those things you can simply go through. Salinity from seawater or saline groundwater intrusion, so that's a big problem as far as dissolved inorganic salts are concerned. So that part also needs to be kept in the mind. And then breakdown products of organic nitrogen yielding ammonia compounds and nitrates. So these are the different form and the origins of the typical inorganic salts which are present in the dissolved form in the natural water, and that can be considered as the impurities. Next is dissolved organic matter. So this is again in dissolved form. So in the left hand side we can write this is a dissolved form. So organic matter. So from where these organic matter get generated, we are going to see that. So natural impurities from decay of vegetables and animal matter leading to coloring material and humic and fulvic acids. So you have seen that a lot of food waste, and as well as the rotten part of the vegetables and animal matter, so those contribute to the impurities, addition of impurities in the natural water bodies or natural water sources. Domestic waste, general biological debris and decay products, soap detergents, so they also can be considered as dissolved organic matter. Industrial discharge from food processing and intensive agriculture industry, paper making, organic and chemical industry, which basically contains fat, any sorts of oils, or any sorts of solvents. So those also can be considered in this category. Residues of some type of pesticides and herbicides also come here in this category. Number three is colloids. So now we are talking about the suspended. So we have finished in column one with dissolved. Now we are talking about colloids. So colloids is basically, if you remember what I discussed sometimes back. So here how these organic and inorganic colloids, which can be considered as impurities, gets generated. We are going to see that. So inorganic colloids such as clay and iron or manganese oxides, so they can be present. Natural organic like macromolecules and particles, so these can be also present. Industrial waste, China clay, paper processing, and so leather process, leather industry, and a component of the sewage solid. So these all can be considered as colloids. So from the sewage, and as well as the leachate from solid waste management system or landfill, those also contribute to creating impurities in the natural water sources. Suspended in inorganic matter. So these are the, as you can remember when I was discussing what are the different type of suspended organic matter, from there only you can understand. So these are basically mostly inert materials which is naturally available. So sand, some portion of silt, industrial materials from coal washing, mining waste, lime and other sludges, oxide, dust, fly ash, all those things can be considered over here. And suspended organic matter, so mostly plant and animal particles, industrial and domestic products. Sometimes, so mostly, predominantly, I would say plant and animal particles. Microorganisms is the next portion among the living materials. So now we are actually talking about the living matter category. So that is the third one. So what are the different type of microorganisms which you can consider? So algae, viruses, bacteria, protozoa, which I actually mentioned. So they can be found in natural waters to some extent, and and you need special type of filtration process to remove them. Uh, those natural waters often can be, it can be a very good breeding ground for all those different types of microorganisms, and that is why they multiply themselves in infinite numbers, and then the impurities or the concentration of them also get increased. So there are several physical factors also over here. For example, exposure to light promotes algae growth. So, several situation, if you observe after going to the natural water bodies, you can understand much better. Iron bacteria in ferruginous wells and iron pipes. So you have seen that some bacteria which can actually destroy iron pipes, and as well as sewage pipes, and so those bacteria live their life by decomposing or by eating out those iron from the pipelines or from the wells. Sulfur bacteria is another one. So in anaerobic conditions, they also decompose sulfur. So, and then we have that larger life forms like fish, worms, different type of larvae. So they also will be present, and at the same time, I was mentioning aquatic plants in floated and in rooted conditions. So all these also considered can be considered as impurities and needs to be, get rid of before supplying them as the drinkable water. And then we have gases, obviously. So this is an important part to be considered, because when we talk about the foul smell coming from the water, that happens because of the solution of some gases. So gaseous impurities needs to be discussed over here. O2 and CO2 occurs in natural water, so that is known to all of you. Now some underground sources contain high amount of carbon dioxide, and few contain H2S, which is one of the important culprit, I would say, which emits foul gases. And if you have H2S and as well as NH3 present in the water, so that would have some amount of foul smell depending upon the concentration. The intensity of smell or the intensity of stinking would also get altered. Fine. So because of the biological decay, it's an obvious process that ammonia would be generated, and as well as from industrial discharge. So cooling towers pick up, and in some industrial sites also you can see some sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, and chlorine also is sometimes can be available in the water. So that is why when we talk about impurities, several different components several different components come into the picture. That might be living organisms, that might be some organic matter, that might be some inorganic matter, and they can be present in different form, which we also discussed, in suspended form, in dissolved form, and we have some gas also which can gets um, mixed in the water, and that can change the quality of water. So with this, now we'll move to the next obvious and one of the most important parts. So that is the waterborne disease. Many of you might be knowing that WHO, World Health Organization, has observed that 80% of communicable diseases that are transmitted mostly through water. So, and if you see the history, not only in our country but in the world, and in most of the epidemic which has happened mostly because of the water contamination, and that is why several diseases like cholera, gastroenteritis, typhoid, amoeba, diarrhea, polio, hepatitis, that is basically one type of jaundice. So these are the different type of disease which are actually which has happened, or human being faced severe challenge to survive in the history because of all those diseases which has a common features is like they all are waterborne disease. So excess fluorides present in the water can cause, which is basically 1.5 milligram per liter and above. It can cause like dental fluorisis, skeletal fluorisis. So it basically wherever you have calcium present in your body, that can get affected because of that fluorides contamination. And this is a permanent irresistible irreversible or irreversible disease that weakens the bone structure, and it cannot actually, it is very very difficult to you know get cured from such kind of disease, and the patient becomes immobile and bedridden because once your calcium portion of your body is affected, and then you will not have that um, strength to stand, and so eventually the patient would be bedridden, and they would be immobile, uh, because of obvious reason. Now, on the other hand, excessive nitrates, if it is present in the water bodies, cause this blue baby symptoms of blue baby disease. So this is basically globalemia. So this is basically one type of anemia which happens because of excess nitrates. It get mixed up in the blood, and then that is also known as blue baby symptoms. Usually it affects the infants, and it affects the hemoglobin in the blood and reduces its capacity to transport that oxygen to the cells, and thereby it causes this this blue color, or deep green color of blood, and that is why it is known as blue baby symptoms. Nitrates in water are caused by industrial effluents, agricultural runoff. So toxic ions of chromium, lead, arsenic, pesticides in water cause disease affecting the kidney, liver, and high blood pressure, paralysis, and very severe part is cancers. Now, once we are talking about toxic materials, so that is basically potentially toxic element, we can say, and these days it is mentioned as PTE. So once PTE is there in the water, that would actually can cause cancers in the body itself, and that is why you have to be very very careful while analyzing the quality of water, and all these can cause waterborne disease. And whenever we say waterborne disease, the form of waterborne disease is huge, because so many people at the same time would be consuming the water which will be distributed. So that is why it is important to remember that the quality of water is the most important, and which has to be assured before adding that water in the distribution system. So these all these toxic substances are due to industrial effluents reaching to the surface of groundwater surface. And another one very important thing is, once particular groundwater table, which you say in other word we can say aquifer, once aquifer is contaminated, it is really you know almost impossible to decontaminate them that back again. So that is why when we are doing some industrial activities, or something of that sort, or when we are discharging something in the environment, we have to be very very careful and vigilant whether whatever we are going to discharge from the industry or from the some other form of plant, whether they are going to create some damage or some negative influence in the environment or not. Because ultimately whatever we how and whatever and way we treat with the nature, and nature will treat in the same way back to us. And most of you know, like, what is happening, and these days, in the form of pandemic, and so many more to come in the future as per the prediction of the virologists and researchers. So that is why, the health of the environment is the it should be the top priority before doing any activity, not only in the civil engineering but also in any sorts of engineering and development. That is why we talk about sustainable development these days. So eventually we should take care of the environment. And so with this we will be finishing the waterborne disease, and now we'll be talking about the characteristics of water. So this is very interesting, characteristics of water. So we basically characterize water in from three different means: physical characterizations, chemical characteristics, and microscopical characteristics. So these are the three different way characterizations and are conducted on water to understand their present situation and what particular parameter should be taken care of. So those things are done. Now, before going into that, as per I scored 2296, there is a tolerance limit, and based on that, water has been classified in for 5 different classes depending on various uses of water. And I am going to talk about that 5 different classes, which you can see here. In the left hand side we have talked about the class and how it is written. So class A, class B, class C, class D, and class E. And on the right hand side you can see the purpose of that and how that water is going to be used and all. So drinking water, source without conventional treatment but after disinfection, so that would come in class A. So the most purest form of water one can get from the nature. Next is class B, so that is for outdoor bathing. So now, from A to E, the quality of water is actually deteriorating. So that is why, we are, when we talk about B or C, without treating, we are not consuming that water. So for B, we are taking baths and we can use for some other purpose of washing and all. Class C, so drinking water source with conventional treatment followed by disinfection. So in this case, we need disinfection as well as the treatment. So class C water. Next is class D. So in this case, fish culture and wildlife propagation can be done. And then comes the last one, class E. So this is basically suitable for irrigation, industrial cooling, and control waste disposal. So this is the rough, classification depending upon how we are going to use. And now slowly we'll be moving into the physical characteristics of water. So first we'll be talking about, so do you have any question till now? Am I audible properly? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, audible.
Okay, so any questions? Don't write message. When I ask question, I should get answer. Don't write text. Don't type text. When I say type, then only you type. Because I will not go back and see your, what you have typed in the Google Meet tab. So, any questions from anyone? So though to some extent we have discussed about suspended solids in the previous slide. So here what we are going to talk about is the physical characteristics, and different form we'll be talking about over here. So the first one is suspended solids. So likewise, turbidity and all those things we'll discuss. So first, so solid suspended in water may consist of inorganic and organic particle for uh, or it can be in liquid form also. Fine. So this is actually we discussed in the previous slides in detailed way. So I am not going to explain these particular slides again. in this particular point again. So clay, seals, and other soil constituents common in surface water. Yeah, that is very true. That it is common, and that can contribute to the overall suspended solid particles, and then some amount of. So sometimes you will see some boil and water, they are creating some they get mixed up with the fine particles of the water, and they can create some suspension on the top of that surface water. So those can be called as immiscible liquids. So that is also one form of suspended solids which you can see, but though this part is not soluble, that's why it is suspended, and oil and water, they don't get mixed up, but because of the all those fine particles get arrested in the top oil part, and then it creates an immiscible liquids, and that also contributes significantly the suspended solids parts for the natural water sources. Next comes organic material such as plant fiber and biological solid. Domestic wastewater, industrial wastewater also contribute to the suspended solid parts. And when some suspended solid is present in the water, this is aesthetically, aesthetically not good, or we cannot see a transparent water, so the opacity would increase, and at the same time we would think that water is not good, though by quality, if it is good and it does not contain any harmful material within itself. However, when you take water, there are two things which needs to be kept in the mind. Within quality, we have that aesthetics part also. If you don't, after seeing that water, if you don't see it is not transparent sufficiently, so you will not feel to take that water or consume that water. So that aspect is also mentioned over here. Provides absorption sites for chemicals and biological agents. Obviously, once you have suspended solids, so those are the areas where all those chemicals and biological agents can sit on and multiply themselves in numbers, though it is not obviously going to happen for chemicals, but for biological agents or any microbes can come and sit on that and create, multiply themselves. So the total solids are measured by evaporating a sample to dryness and weighing the residue. So by that we will be able to get the total solids, and the quantity is expressed in terms of milligram per liter on a dry mass of solid basis. Fine. So with this, now we'll be talking about turbidity. So this is one of the most important point which we should be talking about here. So total solids and suspended solids, what we discussed before. Let me clarify one thing. So there we have discussed like what are the different materials or elements can create this total solids and suspended solids. Here what we are discussing is that one of the physical aspect of water is, or water quality is, total solids or suspended solids. So that is why it is important to note that total solids and suspended solids is considered as a physical characteristics of water, and whether it is less or more, depending upon that, we can characterize the water. Now, as far as turbidity is concerned, you will be, turbidity has something to do with the transparency of the water, how transparent that water is. So turbidity is caused due to the presence of suspended and colloidal matter in the water, and that significantly increase the opacity, and the character of the amount of turbidity depends upon the type of soil over which the water has moved. Groundwaters are less turbid than the surface water, so that is very obvious that once the water percolates through the ground, so the turbidity would reduce to some extent, and on the other hand, once the water is getting surface enough, so the turbidity would be more. Now, turbidity is measured of this main philosophy is just to see how that is the water is resisting the light while it is passing through that particular water, and that is the way turbidity is measured. So mostly, what are the different components which creates such kind of turbidity? So we'll see mostly, turbidity, the erosion of clay, silt, rock fragments, and metal oxides would contribute to the increase in turbidity. Vegetable fibers and microorganisms also contribute. What happens is soaps, detergents, and any emulsifying agents for that matter that will produce stable colloids that results in increase in the turbidity. Discharge of wastewater may cause turbidity of the natural water bodies, and you might have seen this. What happens is during um any times or daytimes, if you see that some uh, wastewater is coming and getting mixed up in a lake or in a pond or in a river, you can see that there is a change in color in the particular water which is getting mixed with the natural water, and the turbidity is very high for that particular water. Fine colloidal materials associated with turbidity provides absorption sites for chemicals and biological organisms. So this part we have discussed before, and so basically, turbidity is measured by the unit, that is the nephelometric turbidity units, or parts per million ppm or milligram per liter, any one of them. But usually, NTU is the standard unit which is by which turbidity is expressed, and turbidity is measured by three different way: turbidity rod, or turbidity tape, Jackson turbidity meters, and Bailey's turbidimeter. So these are the three different methods by which the turbidity of the water can be obtained, and we will be discussing them in the subsequent classes. So there are a few more points we should mention over here. So the sample to be tested is poured into a test tube and placed in the meter, and units of turbidity is read directly on the scale by a needle or by the digital display. Drinking water should not have turbidity more than 10 NTU. So this point should be remembered by all of you, that drinking water should not have turbidity more than 10 NTU or 10 unit, because as I mentioned in the beginning, the turbidity contributes significantly on the aesthetic parts of the water which we are consuming. So the unit is fixed; it has to be less than or equal to 10. The test is useful in determining the detention time in settling for raw water and to dose of coagulants required to remove turbidity. So we'll be discussing in detail about this turbidity meter and different methodology by which we can determine the turbidity of the natural water in the subsequent classes. With this, I'll stop today. If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Sir, what is NTU?
NTU is a nephelometric turbidity unit. If you see, I have already discussed in this previous slide. You can see over here. So this is nephelometric turbidity units, and so this is one of the way of expressing turbidity, like parts per million or milligrams per liter. So this is the most standardized methods by which we can express turbidity by in terms of nephelometric turbidity units, which is in short NTU. Fine.
Okay, sir.